Stay with me until the end of this and tell me in the comments what town you're listening from, because I still can't believe the woman telling you this is the same woman who used to sign payroll for 200 people without her hand shaking. My own son put me behind bars for 2 years for something I never did. He was sure those 2 years would hollow me out, that I'd shuffle out the gate with nothing left but a folder of medications and a thank you for not making a fuss. He had no earthly idea what was waiting on the other side of that fence. My name is Marlene Hale, and I want to tell you exactly how a mother ends up counting the days until her release, like a soldier counting down to the only fight that ever mattered. Day 728, I scratched another little line into the cinder block beside my bunk with the broken edge of a plastic spoon. The sound it made was thin and ugly, and it echoed in a way only a concrete room can echo. Tomorrow would make 2 years to the day since the guards walked me through intake at the Marion Correctional Facility outside Columbus, took my wedding band, my reading glasses, the gold cross my husband gave me on our 30th anniversary, and handed me a number instead. The cell always smelled the same. Bleach trying to cover up everything bleach can't cover up. Sweat and old grief and the kind of boredom that turns into despair if you let it sit too long. But I never let it sit. I sat up straight on that 2-inch mattress like I was waiting for a board meeting to come to order, and that habit got me through more nights than I can count. My bunkmate that whole stretch was a woman named Lorraine, late 60s, in for check fraud. She swore up and down was her ex-husband's doing. She had a way of watching me that I came to find comforting. "You're doing it again," she said that night, not looking up from the paperback she'd read maybe 9 times. "Doing what?" "Sitting like the warden's about to offer you a corner office." She set the book down. Most people, their last night, they can't keep still. "You look like you're about to close on a building." I let myself smile just a little. Maybe I am. Everybody in that place knew my story, or the version of it that ran in the Dispatch and got picked up by the morning shows. Wealthy Columbus developer kills pedestrian in drunken hit and run. Self-made woman's empire crumbles after deadly crash. They ran my mugshot beside an old picture of me cutting a ribbon at a senior housing complex I'd built at cost because the city couldn't afford it otherwise. They never ran that part, just the mugshot, where I looked exactly like what they wanted me to be, a monster who got behind the wheel after a glass of wine and left a young father dying in a crosswalk on Neil Avenue. I didn't do it. I have never in my life left so much as a dent in another car without leaving a note. But the truth doesn't matter much when your own son gets up on the stand, looks the jury in the eye, and says he begged his mother not to drive that night. I built Hale Construction out of nothing but my late husband Thomas's pickup truck and a line of credit at a bank that didn't want to give a woman the time of day in 1986. Thomas passed when our kids were teenagers. Sudden, an aneurysm at a little league game, and after I buried him, I had 2 choices: fold the company and live small, or pick up where he left off. I picked it up. 30-some years later, we did residential, commercial, civic work all over central Ohio, somewhere north of 80 million in assets, and my son Wesley sat at my right hand as chief operating officer. I'd been grooming him to take the whole thing over. That was the plan. Hand it to my boy, retire to the lake house, spoil grandchildren. What I learned too late is that you can love somebody your whole life and never once see who they really are until money is on the table. Let me take you back to the spring before all this. I was going through the quarterly numbers myself, the way Thomas always taught me to: never trust a report you didn't reconcile with your own eyes. And I kept tripping over the same vendor. Meridian Supply Group. We were paying them close to $40,000 a month for materials I couldn't find on a single job site. I called the number on the invoices. It went to a voicemail box that was always full. The address was a UPS store mailbox in a strip mall in Dublin, and when I had our outside counsel pull the registration, the registered agent was a woman named Bianca, with the same last name as the daughter-in-law I'd never fully trusted. Bianca. My son had left his first wife, a sweet, plain, decent woman named Joanne who'd given him 11 good years, for a woman 15 years younger he met at a charity gala. Bianca had a smile that never quite reached her eyes, and a way of pricing every room she walked into. I'd held my tongue at the wedding, I'd held my tongue at Thanksgiving when she suggested, in front of everyone, that the lake house was wasted on one widow. I should have said something then. I called Wesley into my office on a Tuesday. I had the file in front of me. Every transfer, every phantom invoice, 18 months of it, just shy of $750,000 siphoned out to a company that built nothing and supplied nothing and was owned by his wife. "Tell me I'm wrong," I said. "Tell me there's an explanation, and I'll feel like a fool for asking." He didn't even have the decency to look surprised. He told me it was a consulting arrangement. He told me Bianca did strategic procurement work. He told me I was getting paranoid in my old age, that maybe it was time we talked about a transition plan, maybe it was time I let go of the reins. I have run rooms full of men twice my size who wanted me gone. I did not raise my voice. I told him he had until the end of the month to put every dollar back, or I'd hand the whole file to the FBI and let them sort out which of them went to prison. And here is the thing I did right, the only thing I did right in those weeks, and I want the women listening who are dealing with their own snakes to hear me. I did not stand in that office and lay out my whole plan. I did not tell him which agent I'd be calling or what day. I gave him a deadline and I let him stew, and the second he left my office I started quietly copying everything, because some part of me, the part that had survived banks and contractors and a husband's death, already knew he wasn't going to put the money back. He was going to make me disappear instead. 3 weeks later I had a glass of Cabernet at a fundraiser at the athletic club downtown, 1 glass with dinner, and I let Wesley's man drive me home because he insisted, said the valet line was a mess and he'd bring my car round and follow behind. His name was Ray Dunmore, our site security supervisor, a big quiet man I'd never had reason to think about twice. I remember handing him my keys. I remember almost nothing after that, until the police were at my door at 6 the next morning, telling me my Lincoln had been involved in a fatal hit-and-run on Neil Avenue at 11:40 the night before, that a man named Dale Foster, 34 years old, a father of 2, had been struck in a crosswalk and left there, and that they had a witness who put me behind the wheel. The witness was Ray. The car was found 3 blocks from my house, with a dented bumper and an empty wine bottle on the passenger floor I had never seen in my life. The blood test they couldn't process in time disappeared into a gap in the chain of custody. And my son, my Wesley, stood in the front hall of my own home in his good coat and told the officers, with tears in his eyes, that he'd tried to take my keys, that I'd been struggling lately, that this was the nightmare the whole family had been afraid of. That was the morning my life ended and a different one began. What they did next was the part nobody at the trial understood, and it's the part I get asked about most, so let me lay it out plain. Within 48 hours of my arrest, before I'd even been arraigned, Wesley filed an emergency petition for conservatorship. He brought in a doctor who'd seen me exactly once, claimed I was showing signs of early cognitive decline, a danger to myself and the company, and a judge signed an emergency order freezing my personal accounts and handing Wesley control of my finances and my proxy in the business. Overnight. The woman worth $80 million could not access $80. I could not write a check. I could not transfer a dime. I could not hire the kind of attorney I needed, the kind that costs $900 an hour and pulls apart a frame job like this in a month. So I stood trial with a public defender. a decent young man, drowning under 200 other cases, who met me 3 times and spent most of those 3 times trying to get me to take a plea. 18 months if I'd just say I'd been drinking and made a terrible mistake. I told him no. I told him I would not sign my name to a lie, not to save myself a single day. He sighed like I was the most foolish woman he'd ever represented, and maybe in that moment I was. The jury took 4 hours. Vehicular manslaughter, 2 years. The first month nearly broke me, and I won't pretend otherwise. I went from a 4-poster bed to a slab, from a closet of clothes to 2 orange jumpsuits, from running an $80 million company to standing in a chow line wondering if the gravy was meat, or something pretending to be meat. The other women smelled the money on me right off. A woman built like a linebacker, name of Deshawn, knocked my tray to the floor, my 3rd day, and stood over me waiting for me to cry. I stood up instead, slow. My knees were already bad. I looked her in the eye and I said, I built a company from a pickup truck and a dead man's tools while raising 2 kids alone. I have been underestimated by better men than will ever set foot in this room. You knocking my lunch on the floor is the least frightening thing that's happened to me all year. The whole hall had gone quiet. Now I've got nothing left to lose, and that makes me the most dangerous woman in this building. So you do what you want. She stared at me a long moment. Then she laughed, picked up my tray and said, You got spine, old lady. I respect spine. And that was the end of it. After that, they mostly left me alone, and some of them started coming to me at the tables with letters from lawyers they couldn't read, custody papers, parole conditions, and I helped where I could. Prison gave me one thing my life never had. Time. Empty, endless time, and I did not waste a minute of it. I lived in that little library, 2 old computers, a shelf of outdated legal texts, but enough. I read about conservatorship law and forensic accounting and appeals until my eyes burned, and then Lorraine introduced me to a woman named Sylvia Voss, in for wire fraud, who'd spent 20 years as a forensic accountant, before she got greedy at the end of her career and learned the hard way how good she'd gotten at hiding money. I asked Sylvia to teach me how money runs and how to chase it. She studied me over her reading glasses and asked if this was about my son. I said yes. She asked if I really thought I could take him down from in here. I said no, but I could get ready, so that the day I walked out, I'd be loaded. She smiled and said she liked me, and for 18 months Sylvia taught me everything, how a shell company breathes, how to read a wire transfer like a sentence, how to build a record that holds up when a man with $1,000 tie tries to tear it apart. I went into that prison a builder. I came out something else, and then there was my daughter, Nora. Nora is my younger child, 2 years behind Wesley, and she is the smartest person I have ever known. Smarter than me, smarter than her father, sharp enough that I sometimes forgot she was in the room until she said something that reorganized my whole thinking. She'd moved out to Denver years before, kept her distance from the family drama, ran strategy for a tech firm. When the arrest happened, she went quiet, and then she started visiting. Once a month, the 2nd Saturday, and every single visit she sat across that scratched plexiglass and was cold to me. Cruel, even. Mom, you have to stop fighting this, she said the first time, loud, flat, where the guards could hear. Wesley's holding the company together. Just sign the conservatorship papers, cooperate, and when you get out, maybe we can revisit things. She slid a folder under the partition. I felt my whole chest cave in. Not Nora too. I had lost my son. I could not lose my daughter. I started to plead with her, and she cut me off, ice in her voice, told me she didn't want to hear it. And then, while she was talking, her finger moved on the metal counter between us, slow, where the camera in the corner couldn't catch the angle. She traced 3 words. Trust me, Mom. I almost wept right there. I kept my face like stone, the way Sylvia had drilled into me, and said loudly that I wasn't signing a thing. Nora's expression hardened. She snapped that I was impossible, gathered her folder, and clicked out of the room on her heels without a backward glance. But I had seen it. My girl wasn't gone. My girl was inside the wire on the outside, working her brother from a place he'd never think to guard. Every visit after that, she left me a piece of the picture, a word traced on the counter, a page in some company document Wesley wanted me to review, with a phone number hidden in the margin in print so small I had to hold it up to the light. Month 3, she got me a message that just said, "Building it." Month 6, found a lawyer. Month 9, a name, J. Reyes. Month 12, halfway, hold on. Month 15, the medical fraud is documented. And in month 18, she came in with a folder Wesley had actually sent, wanting my proxy signature on a refinancing deal. And tucked into the spine of it, in that tiny hand, was the whole map. Julian Reyes retained. Harvard man, the one who got the Castellano conviction thrown out and won $11 million from the county for a man who'd done 9 years for nothing. The lawyer Wesley had tried to hire 2 years back for a zoning fight, and who turned him down flat with no reason given. Now I knew the reason. Nora had gotten to him first. The rest of the message I read 3 times, and then, the way Lorraine had taught me, I tore it small and let it dissolve. Bianca's Meridian Supply had pulled out closer to $2 million by then, not $750,000, $2 million. The doctor who'd certified me unfit had been paid $60,000 routed through a marketing consultancy 3 days after he signed. The judge who'd granted the emergency conservatorship, a man named Pruitt, who later happened to draw my criminal trial, had taken $100,000 into a campaign fund and a vacation he never disclosed. Ray Dunmore, the man who'd driven my car and lied on the stand, had been paid $80,000 and promised a job in Florida. And Dale Foster, the man who died, the man whose family I grieved for every single night in that cell, had been struck by my car while Ray Dunmore was driving it, not me. And there was a traffic camera at the corner of Neal and 5th that the original investigators never pulled. But Nora's investigator had. Everything. My daughter had everything. All I had to do was survive 5 more months and walk out the gate, and she'd light the match. I could survive 5 months standing on my head. 22 months in, Wesley came to see me. He hadn't visited in over a year, and the man who sat down across the glass looked worse than I did. Thin, grey, his expensive suit hanging loose, dark hollows under his eyes. He picked up the phone. I picked up mine and said nothing. "Mum," his voice cracked, "I need you to sign something. It's important. The company needs to draw on the reserve trust, $5 million, and the bank needs your authorization, your fingerprint in person. If we don't get it, Hale Construction goes under. 30 years of your work, Dad's work, gone." I let him sit in the silence a while. Then I asked him, quiet as a Sunday, where the $2 million he and Bianca had already taken went. His face went the color of paper. "I don't know what you're. Meridian Supply," I said. "I've had 2 years to learn things, Wesley. I know about every transfer, every fake invoice, every dollar. So I'll ask you again. Where'd it go? The condo in Naples, Bianca's car, the boat?" He slammed his hand against the glass hard enough that a guard looked over. "Sign the papers, or I swear to God you will die in here alone, and you will never see your grandchildren. Bianca's pregnant. We're having a family, and you will not be part of 1 second of it." That one landed. The thought of a baby I'd never hold. I felt it go in like a knife, but I had learned to feel a thing all the way through and still not move. I set the phone back in its cradle, looked at my son one last time, and walked away while he was still shouting on the other side of the glass, a sound I could no longer hear. The night before my release, Lorraine and I lay in the dark and couldn't sleep. She asked me what the first thing I'd do was. I told her, a shower long enough to forget what this place smells like. She laughed. Then she asked what came after that. I told her, the war. She asked if I was sure my girl had everything. I said I'd never been more sure of anything. She asked about my son. I was quiet a while. Part of me will always love him, I said. I carried him. I'll love him till I die. But love doesn't mean I let him get away with it. Love that lets a person destroy everyone around them isn't love. It's just fear wearing love's coat. She told me I was going to be all right out there, and then she made me promise that when I got my company back, I wouldn't forget the women in here. I thought about Sylvia, who'd shown real remorse and taught me everything, about Deschon, who was in anger management and writing her kids every week, about Lorraine herself, who spent every day helping other women fight their cases for nothing. I promised her. I said when I got Hale Construction back, I'd build something for women coming out, real jobs, real training, real second chances, because I'd learned in there that the worst thing a person ever did was not always the truest thing about them. The morning of day 7:30, the September sun was already coming up gold over the yard when they walked me to discharge, past the day room, where Deschon nodded at me and I nodded back, past the library, where Sylvia mouthed, "Go get him." They handed me back the clothes I'd been arrested in, a blouse and slacks that hung off me now, and a manila envelope with my wedding band, my cross, and $41. I slipped Thomas's ring onto a finger gone thin and turned it twice and said to him, somewhere out there, that I was about to go to war with our boy, and I hoped he'd understand. The ring sat loose and I swear it felt warm. I chose to believe that was a yes. I walked out the front gate at 10:52 in the morning, and the light hit me so hard I had to stop and shut my eyes. 2 years of fluorescent tubes, and here was the actual sun. Air that smelled like cut grass and diesel and freedom. And when I opened my eyes, the parking lot was full of news vans. There must have been 15 reporters, cameras up, microphones out, and right in the center of it, arranged like the cover of a magazine, stood Wesley and Bianca, my son in a navy suit that cost more than most people's mortgage, his face composed into something that was supposed to look like a son's tender hope. Bianca beside him, blonde and glossy, a real swell to her belly now under a cream dress, holding a bouquet of white roses. They looked rested, well-fed, triumphant. They'd been living in my house, driving my cars, gutting my company, while I lost 26 pounds eating grey meat, and they'd come to stage a reconciliation in front of every camera in Columbus. "Mom!" Wesley's voice rang out across the lot, pitched for the microphones. "Welcome home. We're here for you. We're family." He started toward me with his arms open, Bianca floating along beside him with the roses, and every reporter swung to catch the tearful embrace of a forgiving family. I stopped walking. Every nerve in me wanted to scream the truth into those microphones, to point and say what he'd done. But I'd learned patience in a place built to break it, so I did the one thing my son never expected. I walked past him, not around him, past him, like he was a parked car, like he was scenery. I didn't slow down and I didn't look at him, and you could feel the confusion ripple through the reporters. "Mom." A note of panic now. His hand shot out and closed around my arm. "Wait. Don't make a scene. Get in the car. We'll work this out. Just." I stopped. I turned my head slowly and looked down at his hand on my arm, the same hand I'd held crossing streets when he was 4 years old. "Let go of me," I said, just loud enough, "or I will tell every camera in this lot that you're putting your hands on your mother the day she got out of prison. Your call." His hand dropped like he'd touched a hot stove. And then a sound rolled across the parking lot, a deep, expensive engine, and every head turned. A black Escalade with windows tinted dark as river water pulled in slow and stopped, and the back door opened, and a man stepped out who looked like he'd walked off the cover of a law journal. Charcoal three-piece suit, silver at the temples, glasses that caught the sun. He didn't look at the reporters. He didn't look at my son, whose face had just drained completely white because he recognized him. He looked at me, and only me. "Mrs. Hale," Julian Reyes said, "everything's ready, ma'am, whenever you are." I shook his hand once. I turned back to Wesley and Bianca one last time. The roses had started to droop in Bianca's grip. Her mouth was open. Wesley's face was doing something I'll remember the rest of my life, cycling through it all at once. Confusion, then recognition, that's Reyes. He turned me down. Then the cold drop of understanding. She planned this, from inside, the whole time. Bianca grabbed his arm, her composure cracking right there on camera. "You told me she had nothing left," she hissed, loud enough for a boom mic to catch it, which it did, which is why it ran on the 11 o'clock news. "You said she couldn't fight back. You said I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just let them see me. Let them see that the woman who'd gone into that place was not the woman standing in front of them now." And then I got into the Escalade and Julian closed the door with a sound like a vault. "Where to, Mum?" he asked, watching me in the mirror. I leaned back into leather I'd forgotten existed and took the first full breath I'd taken in 2 years. Outside, the reporters had turned on Wesley like a pack, and he was waving them off, shouting, sweating, swebbing. "I can shower for an hour," I said. "And then I'd like to see the United States Attorney. My daughter tells me they're expecting us." What happened after that happened fast, the way these things do once the dam finally breaks. Nora had spent 2 years building a case so clean it practically gift-wrapped itself. The traffic camera footage at Neal and Fifth, time-stamped, showing Ray Dunmore behind the wheel of my Lincoln, not me, while I was being driven home in a separate car by a service whose records Nora had pulled. The wire trail from Hale Construction through Meridian Supply into accounts in Bianca's name, $2 million of it. The $60,000 payment to the doctor who declared me incompetent. The $100,000 to Judge Pruitt, who, it turned out, had quietly granted the conservatorship and then drawn my criminal case in a way the assignment office could not explain. Ray Dunmore folded in an afternoon. Faced with the camera footage and the money trail, with a real prosecutor and not an overworked PD across the table, he told them everything. That Wesley had paid him $80,000 to take the car, that the wine bottle was planted, that he'd never seen me drink more than a single glass in his life. Bianca tried to run to Naples and got picked up at the airport. Wesley was arrested in my house, in my late husband's study, sitting at Thomas's desk. Judge Pruitt resigned before they could remove him and is, last I heard, under federal indictment, along with the doctor. My conviction was vacated. The state issued a statement so carefully worded it managed to apologize without ever using the word sorry. There was a settlement, a large one, larger than I'll say here, and I gave a good portion of it to Dale Foster's widow and his 2 children, because a man died, an innocent man, and no amount of my vindication changes that. I sat with her, his widow, in her kitchen, and we cried together, 2 women wrecked by the same greedy men, and I told her his name would be on the first building my foundation ever puts up. It is. Wesley took a plea in the end. He didn't have a Julian Reyes. He had what I'd had, the thing the system gives you when you're suddenly nobody. Conspiracy, fraud, obstruction, the whole stack. 14 years. Bianca got 9, and her baby, my granddaughter, is being raised by Bianca's sister, a good woman I send things to and visit when I'm allowed. That child did nothing. She'll know her grandmother. I got Hale Construction back. Nora runs it now, brilliant and ruthless and kind in the right measures, and she's better at it than I ever was. I started the foundation I promised Lorraine, and we've placed almost 90 women coming out of incarceration into real apprenticeships, electricians, project managers, drywall crews, 2 of them 4 women already. Sylvia does our books, paroled and proud of it. Lorraine got out last spring and answers our phones and mothers everyone who walks in. Deshawn is in our welding program. I kept my word. Wesley wrote to me from prison about 8 months in. I didn't open it for a long time. When I did, it wasn't asking for anything. It said he'd spent his whole life believing I loved his father's memory more than I loved him, that I was always comparing him to the man Thomas was, and that he'd let that lie eat him alive until it turned into something that could do what he did. He said he wasn't asking forgiveness because he knew he hadn't earned it. He just wanted me to know he finally understood it was his own choice, all of it, and that he was sorry. Truly sorry. I drove out to see him, through the same plexiglass, only on the other side of it now. He cried. I didn't. I told him I couldn't forgive him. Not yet, maybe not ever, that what he did was too big and cost a man his life, and cost me 2 years I'd never get back. He nodded and said he understood. And then I told him the truth, the whole truth, which is that the door isn't slammed all the way shut. It's mostly closed, locked even, but there's a crack of light at the bottom of it. When he gets out, if he's spent those years actually becoming a better man and not just performing one, maybe we'll have a cup of coffee, just coffee, and see if there's anything left between 2 people who used to be a mother and her son. He put his hand flat on the glass. I looked at it a long moment, and then I put mine up, opposite his, not touching, never touching, just there. And I told him, quiet, knowing he couldn't hear me through the glass, that he would always be my boy. I just didn't know yet if I could ever be his mother again. Then I walked out into the parking lot and the Ohio sun was going down gold over everything, and Nora was leaning against the car waiting for me. And I thought about the woman who scratched lines into a cinder block wall with a broken spoon, and I understood, finally, that they never took anything from me that mattered. They only found out, the hard way, what a mother is actually made of. Sitting on my porch now, watching the light go down over a city I helped build, I keep coming back to one plain truth. Wesley didn't fall into what he did. He chose it, one small permission at a time, and every choice carried a price that came due eventually. The $2 million he took out through Bianca's fake company didn't vanish into thin air. It left a trail, and trails get followed. The lie he told on that witness stand didn't protect him. It just sat there waiting like a debt until a traffic camera and a frightened man named Ray turned it back on him. That's the thing about cause and effect that I learned the hard way on a concrete bunk. What you put into the world doesn't disappear. It compounds quietly until the day it pays out, and it always pays out. I think a lot about why I survived it and he didn't. It wasn't luck. It came down to 3 things I'd ask anyone listening to build in themselves before they ever need them. The first is your character, the part of you that refuses to sign your name to a lie, even when the lie would get you home 18 months early. I told that public defender no, and I meant it, and that single decision is the reason I can sit here today as an innocent woman instead of a guilty one who took a deal. Wesley had everything I had except that. He had no line he wouldn't cross, and a person with no line eventually crosses the one that destroys them. The second thing is your mind, the willingness to keep learning when you've got every excuse to quit. I was 63 years old in a prison library, teaching myself forensic accounting from outdated books because I refused to be helpless. Sylvia taught me to read a money trail like a sentence, and that knowledge, not my name, not my old fortune, is what let me ask my son where the money went and watch his face fall apart. And the third thing is staying power, the stubborn refusal to break when breaking would be so much easier. There were nights I wanted to lie down and disappear. I counted 730 days instead. I held on because my Nora was out there, holding on too, tracing 3 words on a metal counter, "Trust me, Mum," while she built the case that brought it all down. So I'll leave you with this. Be the kind of person who won't bend on the things that matter, who keeps growing no matter their age, and who can outlast the worst season of their life. Money can be taken from you in a single afternoon. Those 3 things nobody can sign away while you're sleeping. They are the only inheritance that's truly yours, and they are the reason I walked out of that gate stronger than the day they walked me in.